A federal judge considering holding Texas in contempt of court over ongoing problems in Texas's troubled foster care system. The latest today on The Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown, veteran Dallas Morning News reporter Bob Garrett with the latest on growing frustration over the state of the state's foster care system. Also, chronic wasting disease for which there is no known cure detected in a Texas deer breeding facility. The Standard's Michael Marks tells us more. Amid the concrete and skyscrapers of a growing Texas city, efforts to cultivate shrinking natural space. Breezy Reyes reports. And what could the fish be telling us? Why a Texas researcher is capturing their sounds. All that and more coming up today on the Texas Standard. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 5th day of December 2023. I'm David Brown. Great to have you with us on this Tuesday. Well, a federal judge in Texas will soon decide whether the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services should be held in contempt of court. If so, this would be the third time in recent years. The department is also the subject of an ongoing lawsuit over foster care conditions in the state and has been under the supervision of court-appointed monitors since 2019. There are about 9,000 children in permanent state custody in Texas, removed from their homes due to circumstances that can include abuse, complex health needs, or the loss of their family caregivers. So what's behind this week's court hearing? Here to tell us more, Bob Garrett. He's been covering this story on foster care in Texas for many years for the Dallas Morning News. Bob, welcome back.
David, we've got to stop meeting like this.
I'll tell you, we've been talking about this for years here, and we appreciate the fact that you've been able to share what you've been reporting on. I understand you were at the hearing yesterday. Can you set the scene for us? What was going on?
Yes, early in the year, Governor Greg Abbott, who is also a defendant in this lawsuit and who, as Attorney General, went to great efforts to try to kill it but did not succeed, changed the defense strategy for the state, consolidating the two state agencies and himself into one entity and hiring an outside law firm, Gibson Dunn. They are more aggressive, and the judge in this case, Janice Graham Jack, yesterday openly said, I know you're wanting to find me doing something that you can go to the Fifth Circuit and get me reversed on, basically. And that's the larger backdrop for the push by the children's lawyers to say the state has been slow walking needed improvements, David.
Tell us a little bit more about the plaintiffs in this case. This is a case that's been going on for many years.
It was brought by Children's Rights, a nonprofit children's advocacy group in New York City, founded by a woman named Marcia Robinson Lowry, who was an ACL lawyer in New York, started the whole category of lawsuits about foster care. And she subsequently formed another group, but they recruited two silk stocking Texas law firms, you might say, Haynes and Boone's in Dallas and Yetter Coleman in Houston, to work pro bono. And they've been driving this since really about 2010, when they started casing out Texas.
And what are the allegations? That Texas has fallen far short of the standards necessary for the health and safety of children in Texas foster care?
Right. You remember kids sleeping in CPS offices until the legislature banned that 3 or 4 years ago, but now they still persist in hotels and churches and other things. This is a double whammy. As you know, it's not good for the kids. These are the toughest kids that private providers won't accept. And it's not good for the CPS caseworkers who have to, in 4-hour shifts, babysit these kids 24/7. They're burning out and heading for the exits again, which was one of the main things this lawsuit was designed to stop, which was kids not even knowing their CPS conservatorship caseworker. Other issues are overuse of mental health drugs and some bad investigations of outcries by intellectually disabled kids.
Why is the judge considering contempt against the state here?
Well, this is her remedy if she thinks the state has been too slow to comply with her orders. In 2019, she slapped $50,000 a day fines for 3 days before suspending them and being satisfied the state had met the requirement, the issue at hand. This year, the new wrinkle is that the plaintiff's lawyers have said she should declare parts of the program to be needing a receiver, be put in a receivership, almost like a bankruptcy of a company, to manage directly for the judge. That would be an unprecedented step almost. It's only happened once before in the District of Columbia in the 1990s.
If that were to happen, would that effectively put the court in control of the Department of Family Protective Services?
Well, pieces of the program that I just mentioned, the mental health drugs, these children that are in unlicensed settings, some of this, of course, is over at the Health and Human Services Commission. Yes, it would put her in charge directly of bureaucrats. I think Texas, the governor and the legislature would go bonkers and would try to get to the Fifth Circuit immediately. How that would all turn out is anyone's guess, David.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of interesting changes at the Fifth Circuit lately.
What do you expect for the rest of the week, Bob?
The plaintiffs are going to put on a Harvard Medical School professor today about the misuse of psychotropics. There's other witnesses. Then the state will get to put on its witnesses. It's almost like a mini trial, and it'll probably last into Thursday or Friday.
We've been talking with Bob Garrett, Austin bureau chief for the Dallas Morning News, who's been covering this story for quite a while. We're going to have a link to more of his reporting at texasstandard.org. Bob, thanks so much for all you've been doing here. We certainly do appreciate you joining us.
It's my pleasure, David, as always.
In Texas, chronic wasting disease continues to spread among the white-tailed deer population. This affliction is similar to mad cow disease. It affects the animal's brain, causing it to lose motor function and eventually die. There's no cure or vaccine for this, so when it's detected in a closed environment, like a private breeding facility, which is big business in Texas, well, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department requires that all the deer that may have been exposed are euthanized. Late last week, the department announced that this had happened at one of their own facilities, resulting in the death of scores of deer. For more now, we're joined by Texas Standard producer-reporter Michael Marks. Hi, Michael.
Hey, David.
Give us some more details about what the Parks and Wildlife Department discovered and what they did.
This happened in the Hill Country out at the Kerr Wildlife Management Area, which is near Hunt. This is a Parks and Wildlife property where people can, recreate. You can hunt and hike out there. But the department also uses it for research. As you said, they've had a herd of whitetails out there for decades. In January, they were conducting some research looking into whether they could help protect white-tailed deer from chronic wasting disease using copper and zinc. So they started testing these animals, euthanized 50 of them as part of the research, and continued to monitor the remaining 80. Mm-hmm. In October, they got another positive test. They tested all the animals for chronic wasting disease, sent those tests to the Texas Medical Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. One came back positive. From there, things moved fast. This is John Solofsky, Wildlife Division Director for Texas Parks and Wildlife.
They notified us, I believe it was on a Wednesday, of that presumptive positive, and we depopulated that pen the following Monday.
Well, how did the deer contract the disease in the first place?
They do not know. It was a 14-month-old male deer that contracted the disease. None of the other deer that they tested, the other 70-odd or so, had CWD. This facility is sort of like a Russian nesting doll of fences, and the research deer are kept sort of at the center of it in their own pen, away from everybody else. Solofsky hypothesized, maybe it came in with some food or hay, but really no way to know for sure.
Wow. Do they have any other options besides euthanizing all the animals?
Well, according to the Parks and Wildlife Department's own policy, this is what had to happen. You mentioned earlier that the department generally requires deer breeders to euthanize their animals after a positive test. Not everyone agrees with this policy, David. Deer breeders in particular feel that it's heavy-handed and there should be, more of a room for middle ground, given that there are some white-tailed deer that are CWD resistant or can contract it but show no symptoms. Most of the wildlife officials across the country, though, agree that this is, the aggressive, better safe than sorry sort of approach is the way to go. Here's John Slofsky again from the department.
The decision to depopulate, is the best decision to make, when CWD exists in a captive facility like that. So the difficulty of the decision is that we've been doing deer research on that facility for nearly 50 years.
So what happens next?
Well, there will be no deer at the facility for at least 5 years, and that's because the proteins which cause CWD can live in the ground for a long amount of time. As for the policy itself of depopulating all the deer in a facility like this, there's actually a challenge in the courts to that right now. In Kaufman County, Robert Williams of RW Trophy Ranch is in a legal battle with TPWD. They've tried to euthanize his animals several times because of positive tests, but so far he's been able to win restraining orders against that. There's some haggling over the legality of those orders right now, but there's a court date set for late February, and a lot of folks are going to be watching that to see what happens as far as how TPWD handles this disease going forward.
Michael Marks is a reporter and producer for the Texas Standard. Michael, thanks so much for getting us up to speed.
Sure thing, David.
Very interesting story there. Joining us now, Wells Dunbar. He is our social media editor, and he's monitoring the talk of Texas on this Tuesday. Welcome back, Wells.
Hi, David. Well, people are talking about the story at the top of the show, how a Texas federal judge will soon decide whether the State Department of Family and Protective Services should be held in contempt of court for the third time over its failure to keep Texas foster children safe. Some comments nodding to the length of the lawsuit and the resources, or lack thereof, that the state has thrown at foster care. Kelly Rasty tweets, a lawsuit that's been ongoing for over a decade concerning Texas foster care system, and yet no special sessions called. Oddly, no prioritization of foster youth and voucher or ESA bills either. Strange priorities, she tweets. Also on X, Meg tweets about the cost of the suit. The way our state treats children in our CPS system is heartbreaking and immoral. And, she says, they are using our tax dollars to fight in court rather than fix the system. Yet another example of how our state leaders don't care about children at all. A couple two hard-hitting comments there about that ongoing suit. It's just one story we're watching, David. I'll be back with more later in the program.
In the meantime, let us hear from you. Look for Texas Standard on your social media platform of choice. Wells Dunbar will be joining us again with more of your comments in about 35 minutes or so. You've probably heard that out in West Texas, Permian Basin area, there have been a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Well, there's one on the table that could have major political implications, ripple effects for a long time. Stay with us.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Enel North America, generating renewable energy with projects run by and for Texans, investing in the future of local communities, schools, and small businesses. Learn more at enelnorthamerica.com/Texas.
You're listening to Texas Standard, and I'm Darrell Watson, and I was raised on Dublin Dr. Pepper.
1, 2.
Dublin Dr. Pepper was actually the original Dr. Pepper. What happened to call it Dublin Dr. Pepper, and what made it so special, was the Imperial Pure Cane Sugar.
On those hot summer days when I'm working away, I need a break from toiling in that precious Texas sun.
I was a dirty, barefoot child and running around, and I had a brother older than me and a brother younger than me, and we were pressing our nose up in the window and watching Mr. Dr. Pepper, Bill Closter, and watching him work that machine all by himself.
She's the sweetest Dublin Dr. Pepper.
He was met by the corporate Dr. Pepper folks, and they were turning to high fructose corn syrup. Mr. Closter, he's like, well, why would you want to do that? Put his foot down, and he said no. Ended up being sued by Snapple. They went to court, thought they had a good chance and all that, but all of a sudden, Dublin Dr. Pepper was dead.
cane sugar keeps me coming back for more.
Well, I love to write songs, and the best way to write a song if you're from Texas is to write about Texas. I had written the song just as a paying homage to Bill Closter.
Oh, Bill Closter was the mixer of that Texas elixir, and us boys that look so humbly down at our dirty feet. She's a sweet.
That kindness is hard to see sometimes. You know, everybody says the world's changing. You don't see people like that anymore. Well, I say malarkey.
Sugar keeps me coming back for more. She's the sweetest Dublin Dr. Pepper.
Legacy still lives in the song and in the hearts of folks in Dublin, Texas.
Give my loving right on time.
I'm Darrell Watson, and you're listening to the Texas Standard.
Every town, every two, every four.
Support for coverage of business comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' comp provider committed to protecting Texas employers by investigating fraud and focused on preventing abuse of the system. More at texasmutual.com/fraud.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. The energy industry is going through a period of consolidation in West Texas's Permian Basin. The biggest fish in the pond, like Chevron and ExxonMobil, are spending billions to buy oil producers in the region, and all that cash could play a very big role in the future of Texas politics. Take Midland's Tim Dunn, for example. Dunn's a Republican megadonor whose money already helped shape debate in the State House. But according to a new report in Bloomberg, his political influence could grow considerably should he decide to move forward with the sale of his drilling company. Joining us now to tell us more, Mitchell Furman, Texas-based energy reporter who wrote about Dunn's opportunity. Welcome back to the Texas Standard, Mitchell.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk a little bit more about Tim Dunn. Do you think most folks in Midland, Odessa would know that name, or is he largely an energy business insider?
Yeah, in Midland and Odessa, I think a fair amount of folks know who Tim Dunn is. But outside of that West Texas region, in the largest Texas cities, he's not as known. He's not out there doing interviews and going on TV. That's not really his style.
So known among politicians because of all that money, it sounds like. So does Dunn currently have an offer for his drilling company on the table?
So he's fielding bids right now. We have reported that Occidental Petroleum and Devon Energy and Diamondback Energy have closely eyed Crown Rock, Tim Dunn's company, and we'll see if Dunn decides to sell.
And if he does sell, how much might that sale net him? Because this sort of gets at the political influence matter, right?
Yeah. So for one, it's shaping up that his company will sell for more than $10 billion.
Wow.
And how much he will receive is not precisely known at the moment because his company it's privately owned. It's not a public company. It's one of the last big private drilling companies out in West Texas. And so because it's private, we don't have all of the public documents that we get with public companies. So, if they are indeed purchased by one of these public oil companies, then we'll get a look under the hood.
Well, let's talk more about the fact that Tim Dunn seems to sort of stand apart in a way from the many people who do give money to politicians. What does set Tim Dunn apart, do you think?
We talked to a bunch of political scientists in Texas, and the kind of consensus was that he gives his money with more of an ideological and policy agenda as opposed to his business interests. He's interested in various conservative issues, but we don't see him out there giving money to issues that are largely impactful to his industry, as we do with, for example, pipeline magnate Kelsey Warren, real estate mogul Harlan Crow. He differs on that front.
Okay, so ideological donor. how would you describe that ideology, and what about the politicians who have benefited from his political largesse?
Yeah, he is, his interests include schools and education, the education system. He gives a lot of money to candidates and groups that have been pushing the private school voucher system at the State House in Austin. He's also given money to plenty of folks who have a hard line on immigration and who have pushed various kind of conservative approaches to the border with Mexico, and so those are just a couple. But he's also, in Greg Abbott's last primary election, he supported Don Huffines, Abbott's primary opponent, and Huffines at the time claimed to have pulled Greg Abbott more to the right.
Mm-hmm. Well, a question, I guess, is how much more Dunn might be able to influence Texas politics than he already does, right?
Right. And while Texas is a massive media market, we have a bunch of media markets across the state. It's expensive to run a statewide campaign, but in oil world, the money is extravagant, and so while the state is expensive politically, for someone like Tim Dunn, this is not a huge chunk of his wealth. So if he does sell his company and receives a large windfall, he can influence Texas politics as much as he wants. We had one billionaire, Brian Sheffield, the founder of Parsley Energy, and Sheffield donates to plenty of Republican politicians. He said that if Dunn does sell his company, he will be able to seriously change politics in Texas for the next 10 years.
For the next 10 years?
And that's at least, right? I mean, it's really up to Dunn.
We've been speaking with Mitchell Furman, who covers energy for Bloomberg. It's a very interesting story, and we'll have a link to it over at texasstandard.org. Mitchell, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Oncology, allowing patients to be actively involved in their health care by providing access to clinical trials in pursuit of new treatments and advances in medical care. More at texasoncology.com.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Thomas. The U.S. Border Patrol is no longer allowed to cut through the Operation Lone Star razor wire that lines the Texas banks of the Rio Grande. Texas Public Radio's David Martin Davies reports.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton asked for the stop order after a lower court judge ruled last week in favor of the Biden administration, which had argued the Border Patrol sometimes needed to cut the razor wire to rescue migrants who were caught up in it and were injured, and that they were trying to prevent deaths. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issued the temporary administrative stay of that lower court ruling. The judge asked the Biden administration to file a brief in the case by the end of the week. I'm David Martin Davies in San Antonio.
The family of a Texas prison guard who died last month while on duty says the death could have been avoided. Jovian Motley's family was shown video footage of the incident during a meeting with state officials. Attorney Justin Moore represents the Motleys.
We saw a prison that is ill-equipped for officers to do their job. We believe what happened to Jovian was due to the fact that there is gross negligence in how that prison is being ran.
Motley died while helping other guards restrain an inmate at the Wainwright unit about 100 miles north of Houston. Attorneys for former Fort Worth police officer Aaron Dean want his manslaughter conviction thrown out. As KERA's Miranda Suarez reports, oral arguments in the case are scheduled for this morning in the state appeals court.
Dean was on duty when he shot and killed a Tatiana Jefferson through her bedroom window in 2019. He was originally indicted for murder, but a jury convicted him on the lesser charge of manslaughter during his trial a year ago. Dean's attorneys appealed the conviction back in August. They say the jury never should have gotten the option to convict on a lesser charge. They also argue that Dean had no chance at a fair trial in Tarrant County because of all the local attention on the case. Before the trial started, 2 separate judges denied requests to move proceedings to another county. I'm Miranda Suarez in Fort Worth.
The city and county governments of El Paso have proposed providing up to $110 million in tax incentives over 25 years to attract Meta, the company formerly named Facebook, to bring a large data center to the region. As KTEP's Aaron Montes reports, Meta would have to meet requirements in 5 phases of the proposed project to qualify for all of the incentives.
The new data center would create at least 50 jobs, with people earning on average more than $86,000 a year. It's likely to also lead to 151 jobs related to the data center. Meta owns and operates Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and WhatsApp with nearly 4 billion users monthly. The deal would require Meta to invest an estimated $800 million into undeveloped land on the state line with New Mexico.
I'm Matt Thomas from the Texas Newsroom.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm David Brown. Texas cities have been among the fastest growing in the country. Places like Austin are building more densely. And for those who live in apartments or condos, well, there might not be a whole lot of dedicated outdoor space. Take a place like the Triangle in Austin, where 2 major roads come together. There are specialty grocery stores, sandwich shops next to several large complexes, but also 3 acres of space for those with a green thumb. Breezy Reyes dug into what's behind the Sunshine Community Gardens.
As you enter the gardens, you're surrounded by greenery. Wafts of basil, sage, and rosemary travel in the morning air. The chicken coop is lively, and if you're there early enough, you might hear the rooster crow. The garden is lush and full of life. Birds are chirping, monarchs are flying around, all enjoying what it has to offer.
This is my happy place. We live in an apartment, and we do have a balcony, but there's too much wind there to really garden. And watching plants grow has always been a joy to me. So here I not only get to watch plants grow, but I get to be with other gardeners who enjoy being here.
Lucille Pulliam is one of the hundreds of gardeners who rent a plot here. It's meant to be as welcoming to as many people as possible. Garden President Iris Slevin says it's been this way since its opening in 1979.
The goal was to bring a space for community gardening in an organic way, and to bring a joint location where people could come for community, for food, just be outside, be in the outdoors and get your hands in the dirt.
The land is leased from the nearby Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, so accessibility has long been part of its mission. Lucille Pulliam, who just turned 90, gardens on a raised bed.
I have problems with balance because I've had strokes, and so it would be difficult for me to get down and garden on the ground. But here, I not only have a raised bed where I can stand and do it, but the water is right attached. It's also convenient. And it's also about a 15-minute walk from where we live. So I get my exercise and I get to do my gardening.
This past summer, the board at Sunshine expanded the number of raised beds from 3 to 10.
We have people of retirement age all the way to elementary schoolers, like my daughter, Maple. She's 8, and she has a garden in the children's garden.
There's not a lot of big things that can grow in a 3-foot by 3-foot garden. But once in my mother's garden, we once grew a maybe 3-foot zucchini.
I asked both mom and daughter why they like the garden and what they learned from it.
What I get out of gardening is a communion with nature and a understanding of seasonality that I think that a lot of people in our culture don't have, because we go from one air-conditioned space to another air-conditioned space, and it's very easy to forget that there are seasons.
I learned how to water plants and what variety of carrots there are.
If a gardener produces more than they can take home and use, they give it to friends or donate it. That's another part of Sunshine's mission. Garden Vice President Marcia Reedy says they even have garden space set aside specifically for donating fresh produce.
Now, normally, like for a year's worth of produce, we're donating in the hundreds and hundreds of pounds because the summer months are very, very productive.
Gardeners also come to Sunshine to be with other people, learning and experiencing the earth together.
The friendships are the best part. And, there's 200 plus personalities, so it's a community. That's the way it goes. There are some friendships that go back for decades, and always a little competition in there, friendly competition, but you definitely go to the garden and budget extra time because you're going to stop and you're going to talk to people, and somebody may ask you to look, hey, come look at this plant, or hey, would you, what are your thoughts about this, or hey, that's interesting what you're doing. So the friendships and relationships really go way back.
Yes, and two of the important friends are Iris, who is the current president, and Marcia, who I was admiring her bed of zinnias last spring, and she invited me to pick them anytime I wanted. So when I would come to the garden, I would pick myself a fresh bouquet, which was really nice.
Sunshine Community Gardens might be a unique place for Lucille and her friends, but there are thousands more like it across the country. You can find the one nearest you, or start one of your own at communitygarden.org. In Austin, I'm Breezy Reyes for the Texas Standard.
We've had lots of folks listening to the Texas Standard podcast. It's out there everywhere in all the usual places. But there's another way to keep up with Texas news, and that's by signing up for the Talk of Texas, the free weekly newsletter from the Texas Standard team. Links to top stories, behind-the-scenes sneak peeks, and a whole lot more. Just navigate your browser to newsletter.texasstandard.org to sign up. The next edition's out tomorrow, so your timing couldn't be better. Speaking of time, coming up on 39 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. Jails, in many cases, have become mental health treatment centers. People with mental illness or who are homeless end up behind bars at higher rates. But some Texas counties have decided it doesn't have to be that way. Miranda Suarez of KERA reports Tarrant County is trying to give low-level offenders treatment instead of jail time.
Back in October, Joe Jernigan stole a bottle of wine from a convenience store.
So I walked outside with it and sat down and smoked a cigarette, and the police pulled up. And the guy was just writing me a citation, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll just go to jail and sober up.
So he asked to go to jail instead. Jernigan says he could have bonded out pretty easily, but he chose not to. He says his kids are getting old enough to see what's going on with his addiction, and he doesn't want to hurt them. He hopes he could find some help behind bars.
I need to go to jail. Yeah, I've reached a point where I was no longer safe to myself.
But Jernigan isn't telling this story from jail. He's sitting in an armchair in Tarrant County's Mental Health Jail Diversion Center. If someone gets picked up for a minor crime, like petty theft, and they have a mental illness, they can go to the diversion center instead of jail. There, people can get physical and mental health treatment. Staff can help them find a job or housing or even their family members in other states.
So we're upstairs in the mental health jail diversion program. We have 42 beds spread across 30 rooms.
That's the diversion center's director, Mark Tittle. The center is a former assisted living facility right around the corner from the shops and restaurants on Magnolia Avenue in Fort Worth. Tittle says staff tries to make the place as homey as possible. There's a kitchen, TVs, and a lending library with books and games.
We want them to feel when they come here that they're valued, that they're wanted. And that's a better starting point to begin with when you're looking at mental health treatment.
When the center first opened in 2022, it only accepted people who were picked up for trespassing. In March, eligibility expanded to a few more misdemeanors, like marijuana possession. Tittle says as of September, pretty much any nonviolent misdemeanor can be diverted, with a few exceptions, like DWIs or weapons charges.
We're hoping that, just by broadening the net, we can get more people and help more people get connected to wellness.
Tittle estimates the center has gotten about 800 referrals since it opened last year, and almost all of those people were experiencing homelessness. For people who live on the streets, it can be hard to avoid the criminal justice system. Someone might trespass to find a place to sleep. They might get arrested for public intoxication because they live in a public area. Tarrant County Misdemeanor Court Judge Deborah Neekum says these people can become what she calls frequent flyers.
I have one gentleman that I've seen in my court over and over and over again, so many times that I know his face and I know his name. And every time he comes in, it's for a new criminal trespass or a public intoxication, some combination of the two.
Neekum spoke to KERA in April. She said treatment can stop the cycle of constant arrests.
It's not illegal to be homeless. It's not illegal necessarily to be addicted to substances. What the preferred thing to do would be to get these folks help.
For Joe Jernigan, when he chose to go to the diversion center, his theft charge was dropped. With the center's help, he got into a 6-month residential treatment program.
When you're kind of going through this thing, everything is kind of, you're just kind of in limbo. You don't know if it's going to work out, or there's just a lot of mixed feelings.
He says the people at the diversion center were there to help him work through all that and get him on his way to his next step. I'm Miranda Suarez in Fort Worth.
If you've been anywhere near the Gulf Coast, you may have heard something that sounded, well, a little fishy. Or perhaps you haven't heard this sound. That is actually the Gulf toadfish, which can be found in the Mission Aransas estuary around Port Aransas. Gulf toadfish weigh just a few pounds, are under a foot long, and bumpy and brown like actual toads. That sound was recorded by the University of Texas Marine Science Institute's Philip Souza, a PhD student who spent time in the area documenting the sounds of marine life. Paula Levine-Kuhn is an environmental fellow for the Texas Observer who's been covering the science of recording fish. Paula, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
Your story focuses on a student, Philip Souza, who, to my understanding, has been taking animals out of the ocean and recording them with high-powered microphones, the type we might actually use for our radio broadcast, although I don't think that these are submersible here. Can you tell us a little bit more about his setup?
Well, he took me on a tour of his lab, and he has a small fish recording studio in it. And you walk in, and lining the bookcase on the walls are a bunch of plastic vials containing ethanol, shrimp, all dead, and small fish. And he has an on-air sign in the middle of all these vials. Mm-hmm. And below it, he has some undulating black acoustic foam covering an aquarium. And he sticks something called a hydrophone in it, which is a underwater microphone connected to a recording device, and records fish that he's put in the aquarium.
And why is he doing this? What's the goal in documenting these sounds?
The sounds of fish, which are called soundscapes, can tell you a lot about what's happening in an estuary. It can tell you if an estuary is healthy. It can tell you if an estuary has been socked by a natural event like a flood. And it turns out that the more diverse sounds on an estuary generally means that an estuary is healthy. And it's a cheaper way to document these sounds than some of the traditional ways like the gill netting that Texas Parks and Wildlife does.
Yeah, now you talk about a concept called passive acoustic monitoring, which has been around for a few decades and used for coral reefs. What is that, and what have scientists learned doing these types of recordings?
Well, passive acoustic recording is what Philip does. Basically, you put out microphones under the water, and you set them out for a while. They're limited by the battery life, basically, but usually it's for a matter of weeks. And you listen to what you hear, and then you take the SD card out of it, and you can look at a spectrogram on your computer and see a visualization of what these sounds are. And it turns out that in the Mission Aransas estuary, about half the fish there vocalize.
Very interesting. Well, what about any scientific breakthroughs that might come of all this research?
Well, some scientists have figured out that if there's a coral reef that's in trouble and needs to be repopulated by species, that if you actually play the sounds of a healthy reef on that coral reef, it'll repopulate faster than otherwise.
Interesting. Now, Paula, I know you've reported this story. I assume you've spent some time hearing some of these sounds of marine life. Let's have a little bit of fun here. We're going to play a sound right now and see if you can identify which one it is. We'll give you two options afterwards, all right?
Okay.
Here we go.
Aha.
Aha. Do you think you know what it is without me giving you the options? I'll just throw that out there.
I do. I think it's the snap, crackle, and pop of snapping shrimp.
Well done. Well done. Now, according to Susan, in your story, those shrimp close their claws so quickly that, it creates bubbles that pop, and that's where the snapping is coming from?
That is exactly right. These crazy little shrimp have one huge claw, and when they snap it shut, it creates a bubble that floats and it pops, and that is what you're hearing in that recording.
Very impressive, Paula, and the reporting is impressive, too. We're going to have a link to it at texasstandard.org. Paula Levine-Kuhn is an environmental fellow for the Texas Observer. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Enel North America, generating renewable energy with projects run by and for Texans, investing in the future of local communities, schools, and small businesses. Learn more at enelnorthamerica.com/Texas.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. The Texas legislature is still dominated by male lawmakers. In fact, as it currently stands, men outnumber women in the Texas Ledge by more than 2-1. But that doesn't mean that gains haven't been made among female lawmakers. The 88th legislature had the highest number of elected women in at least the last 5 sessions. Women who do hold elected statewide office are not distributed evenly between the parties. There are twice as many Democratic women in the legislature than Republican women. This is something the Texas Federation of Republican Women is hoping to change. And we're joined now by Kat Parks, former vice chair of the Texas GOP. Kat, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
I wanted to start by asking you why you think there is such a difference in the number of Republican women compared to the number of Democrats in the Texas legislature. What accounts for that?
You know, I've actually spent all of my time on the Republican side of things, but I can tell you that the amount of interest that Republicans have started putting into bringing more women to the party and encouraging more women to run for office has greatly picked up since 2020, as you can see with the number of women that we were able to elect in 2022.
Why do you think 2020 was a kind of fulcrum point for Republican women?
I can tell you exactly why, because I became the chair of candidate recruitment for the state for the first time.
You were determined to bring about some kind of change.
Absolutely. There had been no statewide effort to do recruitment, and the then chairman, James Dickey, identified that was a need that we had. Women and men running for office, they approach it completely differently. The average woman who runs for office has to be asked 7 or 8 times before she says yes. The average man, once. So it was really a matter of getting out and changing the message and reaching out to more of our capable women who are out there, who we need to be out there fighting the battles for us.
What is the reason for that seeming reluctance of women, as you see it, to pick up the staff, if you will, and decide I'm gonna run?
I think it's purely anecdotal, but having worked with candidates, I can tell you that when a woman thinks about running for office, typically she's trying to decide if she's qualified at every single level and every single point, and really wants to understand what the qualifications and the needs are. Mm-hmm. Whereas, interestingly enough, a man feels like, absolutely, I'm good enough for it and I'll figure it out on the fly.
I was talking with the head of Annie's List, which is a Democratic organization trying to get more women in Texas politics, and they have a training component. What about the Texas Republican Party or the Texas Federation of Women? Is there that element there?
Absolutely. Well, that's part of what started to change the narrative in 2019. For the first time, a big C3 organization called the Leadership Institute came to Texas, and they trained over 2,500 conservatives to run for office for the first time. That had been the first training component that had been offered statewide in at least the previous decade. So there's a lot of interest, and frankly, I think it suits Texas to see this happening.
Kat, why do you and others now seem to feel so strongly that it's important to elect women to office? What is it that women bring to the table that their male colleagues don't?
I don't think you have to put it in the juxtaposition of women versus men, but I can say that we all want better representation, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. You know, we can all look at the things that are happening in government where we say, who is running this train, right? And so I think for Republicans, it's a basis of merit. It's not a basis of identity politics. But what we did recognize was that there was more opportunity to go out and to find women who are particularly qualified to doing it. And those recruitment efforts had really stalled over time. Attention had gone elsewhere. And we needed to go back out to the source of women who are capable and intelligent and freedom loving, want limited government, want a better world for their children and better health care options. And, Republicans have really picked up the ball and gone after those women who would serve well in those roles.
So if a conservative woman's listening to us right now, what would you say to her if she's thinking about getting into politics but not really sure where to start?
Absolutely. Get into politics, whether it's with the Republican Women's Group. We have wonderful Hispanic groups around the state. If you want to get involved with your local party, here's a fun fact. I got involved in Republican politics for the first time 6 years ago. So I was just a stay-at-home mom, ranch wife, running businesses from afar, but I got involved. I ended up running our primary. We needed somebody to run the election. And then from there, kept asking questions about how I could get involved or what needed to be improved upon. And it quickly led to me being a vice chair. I'm now a president of a group that works on specifically targeting Hispanics and bringing more Hispanics to the Republican Party and helping Hispanics come to our side.
Kat Parks is former vice chair of the Texas GOP. We're going to have links to more at texasstandard.org. Ms. Parks, thanks so much for taking time to talk with us on the Texas Standard.
Absolutely. Every person in Texas has a gift. If you're a woman who's interested in getting involved in politics, find a way. We need you.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. Wells Dunbar is monitoring what Texans are talking about online. Wells, welcome back.
Howdy, David. Good to be back with you. Interesting conversation we just heard there. I would note there the hearing from the vice chair of the Texas Republican Party Committee.
Vice chair. Yeah.
Former vice chair, pardon me. Hearing from her, and then hearing from one of the folks at Angie's List, the Democratic group working to get more women into politics at the state and local level.
Yeah, that was on yesterday's broadcast. Yeah. If you missed it, you can go over to texasstandard.org and check that out as well.
Definitely so. Well, some interesting stuff, interesting stories that may have flown below the radar. I love picking these things up from our friends and listeners out there. Interesting comment on the Facebook page from Jimmy Kelly, who notes that Lubbock is losing LPL, Lubbock Power and Light, as an electricity company as we are moved to the ERCOT grid and competitive electricity market. He's asking some of our friends out there, got any advice for the people in Lubbock for choosing an electric company without getting price gouged? Yeah, apparently Lubbock moving from this model that several cities have, where it's one single municipally owned entity, to a competitive market. This coming after the Lubbock City Council, I think a few months ago, approved a list of 24 retail electric providers to operate, and that timeline for the switch, I believe, coming in spring, I believe March of 2024. Tyler Malloy says this is one instance in which free market competition is gonna cost you. Texas needs legislation banning the for-profit approach to utility providers, in his words. And Jordan says, my advice would be just pick the cheapest possible plan for you. I did not like picking energy plans. I thought it was stupid and overly complex, in his words there. And yeah, a lot of these things can be quite confusing, charging you by the amount of energy used, etc., how much you go through in a certain amount of time. But yeah, an interesting development there to see a city as large as Lubbock making this change to this different model of electricity pricing, David.
I should point out that the listener there talking about what do I do, where do I go, there is the Public Utility Commission maintains this website called powertochoose.org. You enter your zip code and then you can answer some questions and narrows your search. So there are options if you find yourself in a situation there where you don't know what's coming up next and what you need to do to try to lower your own costs. We're out of time for the big broadcast, but the news continues 24/7. You know where, texasstandard.org, and Wells Dunbar is continuing to monitor the talk of Texas. Managing editor of the Texas Standard, Gabriel Munoz. Managing producers, Laura Rice. Our executive producer is Rhonda Fanning. We're going to be back here tomorrow, and we certainly do hope you can join us.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Wooldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family.
Thanks so much for listening to the Texas Standard. KUT and the Texas Standard are members of the NPR network. It's an independent coalition of public media podcasters. You can find more shows in the network wherever you get your podcasts. I'm David Brown. We'll see you tomorrow.
Support comes from Austin Water. Wastewater charges are based on customers' water usage mid-November through March. Using less water now by turning off sprinklers and fixing leaks lowers charges all year. Water-saving tips and averaging periods at austinwater.org.